Are we recording?
I assume this is all hot.
We always start with me saying.
There's a red light on.
We always start with me saying, "Are we recording?"
That's true. The oldest.
Yeah. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
How's it going?
Stranger. Good.
So
What are you looking at?
we're back at the kitchen table. It's been a while.
Since when?
Since we last
you
had
ate
the
lunch?
conversation. Since we had a conversation at the kitchen table.
Yeah. When was it? Ross?
Well, that was you and Ross. Ross Chapin,
You
neighborhood
you remind
playbook,
me of Ross.
or neighborhood fame. Yeah. I remind you of Ross.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a very nice compliment. Thank you. Cheers to Ross.
I mean, he's in better physical health than you, but.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, we're here to talk about the year that was. We're in January, the tail end of January 2025.
But not just the year that was.
Right, the year that will be.
The year that will be.
But the reason we're here, partially, is because we have our Anthology.
How are you even holding it?
Each year we send out, it's hot off the presses. Each year we send out a little booklet about the year that was. This year we turned it into more of a magazine format, and it's hefty.
How do the kids say it? Zine?
I don't know. What?
Zine?
Oh, that's like short for magazine?
I don't know.
Yeah, so it's a zine
I feel like
vibe.
I've made that mistake before. I'm not even sure it is short for magazine.
I'm looking at the audience here that's younger than us.
They're shaking their heads.
We have a live studio audience.
A couple of them are blushing.
Oh, ooh. No, it's very visual. It's fun. It's going out into the mail for a couple hundred people, and then we'll share it digitally too. But we thought we'd take this opportunity to kind of chat through, what we learned in 2024, kind of some of the projects that got us out of bed each day, got us excited, and how that might direct us into 2025. But first, what's going on with your wrist?
Yeah,
You're trying to hide it. It matches your sweater.
Speaking of physical health, I fractured it playing basketball.
Like
You
dunking?
should see the other guy. Yeah, definitely from a
like a
dunk.
one-handed-
Left hand, off-handed dunk.
Yeah.
In traffic.
Yeah, but you posterized the guy and then
he
had to leave because your wrist got hurt.
Yeah, but I played the rest of the game.
Good. Well, get better soon.
I will.
Yeah,
At
like
least
a
it's
month
my
of that
offhand.
or a month of the cast?
Yeah. Hopefully. Yep.
All right, so
How's your
my
injury?
foot.
Your foot.
It hurts.
Yeah.
I'm kind of ignoring
Aging
it.
is hard.
I'm just
and real.
hoping it doesn't break. It's not broken, but it just hurts.
I have found that if it hurt and it's on the verge of broken, that
I should stop.
keep running.
I
Is the
should
way
stop
to go.
running.
Just
No,
don't
I'm not
stop.
going to stop.
Don't stop.
I'm pushing through. I'm doing physical therapy, so. Okay, we need to move on.
We're
from
going to
this
cut most
people
of this. I
don't.
assume.
Yeah, people don't care.
We're warm. Warmed up. Let's get into it.
All right, so what comes into your mind when you think back to 2024, the year that was?
I can't believe it's over already.
Is there a theme or one project in particular, one type of project that stood out from a Yard and Co. Perspective?
Well, when people ask what's your favorite project, that's like choosing your favorite kid. So I don't answer those questions usually. But I think thematically.
But you could.
Thematically, I feel like a few things kind of came into their own or came into focus this year that are worth highlighting. One is the office. That's where we're sitting now. Really we occupied it late 23, we moved in. But in 2024, it really became part of the team. It started hosting pretty big events. We had CNU and Strong Townsend in the spring. That was a lot of fun, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of parties, a lot of events in and out.
Walkabilitinis. Tactical bourbonisms.
Yeah, sold out. We really should bottle that and distribute that.
A walkabilitini?
Yeah. Canned cocktails are a thing.
First 16 ounces.
So we had a lot of people in for that. As part of that, we built out the storefront. But then I think the seed was also planted looking ahead to the fall when Blink came to town. And some of these are things we maybe should spend more time talking about. But Blink came active in October, and the storefront became active with retail. We had the side yard transformed into what we called the backyard, and the deck as part of Blink.
Brought to you by Skanska.
Yeah, good product placement. And others.
Mm-hmm.
Porch Swing Company.
Porch Swing Company.
Was active.
Nair Properties. Plant Trolley.
Yep.
Now we have to name them all.
Yard
and Company.
And that was a lot of fun to be part of. That was a full team effort to bring Blink to the backyard. And then organizations like Civic Cincy and our neighbors even started using the office for events and meetups and presentations. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, when it snowed recently, the neighbors all built snowmen out there. That was cool to see.
I did not see that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was hiding at my house.
You're hiding it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I think of just kind of continuing on that note, like outside of the kind of consulting projects that we do in different places around the country, some of the things that come to mind are the office, Blink, kind of the less typical consulting firm projects, more local, visible stuff. Also, Elliott Cafe, our old office at the garage, is now a really successful coffee shop, cafe. It's really fun to see that space bringing a lot of people in to that district. So yeah, we're kind of beyond the normal client work that we do. We've been doing a lot of stuff that's kind of physical and local to Cincinnati in nature. Opened the Oklahoma City office as well too, officially announced that. That's been going well. I'll be there in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are also come to mind for me too.
Yeah, a lot of anchors for your yard, just kind of rooted in the places that we're working, so, and have worked. So that was fun to see. I think some other themes for the year that we kind of picked up early on as we were launching into 24 was we were just finishing out all the Ottawa work and just starting all the Millersburg work, and really became intrigued and spent a lot of time thinking about and tinkering with the idea of small towns as master plan communities. I thought that was a kind of driving theme to last year that's even going to springboard potentially into our own development work in the months and years ahead here in Cincinnati.
Which, if I can jump in, part of what I'm interested in there's a lot of things, the small towns as master plan communities, which maybe we can link to the slides or something that we did for CNU.
Yeah.
But let's say, we're entering we've been in a political world that's pretty, toxic, some might say. But a lot of the center point of those conversations has been around small towns, I think, and what they've lost. And when you think about small towns as a master plan community, what I like about that, or I'm interested in diving into more, is this difference between the top-down sort of, well, let's bring an electric car battery company to town. Let's bring jobs to town. These sort of big corporate things that don't necessarily add to the quality of life and livability that has also been lost. That I think when we work in small towns, we hear a lot more about this loss of community, loss of small mom and pop shops, loss of the main street.
Yep.
So that's going to be interesting to dig into a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be more relevant than ever, both kind of big picture economically with how people are moving around regions. We saw, obviously in the tail end of COVID, most people putting down new roots in some cases far-flung communities from where maybe their job is physically located, and starting to reinvest in their place, in their community, get to know their neighbors more. So kind of macro trends starting to, I think, force people or allow people to rediscover the towns that maybe they grew up in, but then ended up leaving and now are returning back to as their parents get older and their jobs allow them to plug in from more places. But then, yeah, like you're saying, I think what the kind of discourse over the last year or so and what the election kind of bore out was this kind of sense of loss, a sense of kind of traditional neighborhoods, traditional communities that people really want to see. And, that's kind of a fundamental aspect of our work when we're working in these small towns. So I thought that was a great trend. Anything more on that?
No, I think it's interesting. I think that small towns have pretty bright futures in terms of kind of meeting the needs of what people want. And I don't know, connecting back to people's roots. I think more and more people are craving just connections with neighbors and the small town, some of the things that you associate with small town personalities. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and a couple other things to dig into. I think one is, one of our foundations at Yard is an understanding or a sense that the traditional tools of growth and development, like you mentioned, the battery kind of plants. The silver bullets, mega catalytic projects aren't necessarily, directly applicable to these. Even the way we think about traditional master plan communities, new towns, you can't just go and assume that nobody lives in these traditional Main Street towns, that there's no history there, no story, no community, that we really have to sculpt a new set of tools and approaches to really making these communities great. And I think that's something that we really are driven by and curious about at Yard. I think the other thing that you touched on that's linked to this as well, though, is what we saw even in the Biden administration, but it seems like it'll continue in the next, is the re-onshoring, the reindustrialization, the bringing of new jobs, new technology, new industry and manufacturing to places big and small, and understanding what makes these places successful and how to best leverage these new industries, this new onshoring for community growth. Already this year, I think, whether it's the Mill Creek or thinking in the Detroit region or the Maumee, Northwest Ohio region where we're working, thinking about how new investment in American manufacturing is starting to drive community growth. Is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think both politically and from a policy standpoint, we need to be remembering and reminding ourselves, and maybe our audience is we're preaching to the choir a little bit. Maybe we need to preach to the politicians a little bit more, but just slopping down a $6 billion factory that is important, brings $25, $35 an hour jobs to these places, isn't going to politically make everybody happy without the policies and intentionality around revitalizing the housing stock in the right way and the main streets and some of those community assets in the right way. And then from a policy standpoint, it's the same. If we're putting that multi-billion-dollar factory in a field somewhere, we can't just assume that the land use patterns will start to sort of solve for themselves in the same way. So,
if the net effect is capital that is leaving that community and going to a traditional power center or truck traffic, we've left a lot on the table. I think we first realized this is going back a little further, but in the work we were doing in Southwest Indianapolis, when we realized that if we just sat back and watched logistics centers continue to distribute themselves across the landscape, that was a real threat to quality of life and way of life, and left a lot on the table. We can talk about jobs all we want, but if we don't talk about real authentic community growth, we're not maximizing its potential. And so I thought what we did in that project that was really interesting is we really thought about, okay, industrial growth is important, it drives the modern economy, but we also have to talk about real community, real assets, real things that foster human connection. And so pivoting that project to be more about quality of place, access to nature, amenities like the river, focusing there and figuring out how modern manufacturing and industry pairs with how I get to school in the morning, or where I meet up with my neighbors, or how I explore the world around me. I thought that was kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're on the verge of making this a small town revitalization podcast, so let's continue.
You talked about themes.
I can't talk, it's such an interesting topic. We could talk about it for a long time. Maybe we should.
Well, just a couple of things that maybe are less themes about the world, but themes in our work and who we were working with. I think last year, we've always worked a lot with foundations who care about community and place, but I think that reached new levels with the Lilly Foundation, and Kaiser and others that we were working with, the Waltons. Then we also worked with our first universities in conjunction with that. And I thought that was interesting. And already this year, kind of looking ahead, we're starting to work with hospitals who are starting to think about their position in communities and wellness. And
who knows what's going to happen with the federal government. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now. But these institutions like hospitals, foundations, universities are critical to kind of the growth and economic development of these cities and districts. And the work at Indiana Tech in Fort Wayne was really impactful and led to a big investment by the Lilly Foundation. And we kind of created kind of a whole new division of the university as part of that on an innovation campus, which was really fun and rewarding to see it get funded. And working with Parkview up in Fort Wayne and other groups like that, I think is going to be a big part of 2025.
Yeah.
And a big part of cities, continuing to be a big part of cities. Some people have been doing it for a while, and others are just catching up.
So we've been talking about a lot of big things. I think just real quickly to boil it down, and I have one more question for you for last year, but before we get there, I think the other thing that we really spent a lot of time homing in on and articulating our approach to was the first 16 feet. It was an idea that we've talked about for several years. There you go.
Visual illustration.
But I think this year is where both our partners and clients, as well as what we were developing in terms of solutions, both design solutions, but also product solutions for the first 16 feet, I think really hit a new level of sophistication this year. Mm-hmm. And I think looking ahead to next year, already I can see that kind of ascending into being a pretty prominent focus in our work. Particularly when you start thinking about the future of downtowns and this return to, this new need for rethinking downtowns in a bold way. I think that's going to be exciting. But before we shift into 2025, what were some things last year that, this time last year?
I asked the questions here.
I'm taking over. You would predict it was going to happen in 24, but turned out to surprise you. Maybe it didn't go as you thought.
Oh, wow. Put me on the spot.
Besides your ankle.
Besides my ankle. So surprises from 2024. We may have to edit out my long pause here.
Let's cut to commercial.
Yeah, let's cut to our advertisers.
Tide. I don't leave home without it.
Tide. Procter & Gamble. I think you're putting me on the spot, but I think, I mentioned Elliott, the coffee shop in the former garage doing well. I think that's, I don't know if surprising is the right word, but really amazing to see. And it kind of is a real world example of what we tell people to do, which is, start small, start with a manageable thing. That's a $150,000 project that is bringing hundreds of people a week to a corner of this district, and I would say 80 to 90% of those people are coming to that city for the first time, maybe.
In a place where
putting new eyeballs on it.
No market study would have said that a third coffee shop in Dayton would make sense.
Yeah, and it's the third coffee shop. So
shows
the
power
traditional route of a
differentiation.
market study or location, the also typical approach would be to do kind of $1 million, $2 million project or more to really save a place. I mean, this is a really off the beaten path area.
No parking.
It's kind of hard to get to. No parking. Yeah, it turns the tables on a lot of thinking. I think there were times, I don't know if this falls into the surprise category, but there were times this year where, whether it be Blink or First 16 Feet or Indiana Tech, where our entire team got together and it reminded or connected back to what you and I talked about when we were alone at the kitchen table like 8 years ago, which is, these folks who have planning backgrounds, video storytelling, brand activation, that when we got in a room together, say at Indiana Tech, we created a whole new kind of product for a university and branded it, created the operations for it,
designed it,
then put it all into a grant application that, got $21 million in the door. And then the office, we touched on a few of these, but then the office too, it's just been a great addition. It's such a good location and such a great place to host conversations. I mean, when we were at CNU, I think I took a video on my phone and showed it to somebody, but we had a conversation in here about, Walnut Hills. We had another one in there about the west end of St. Louis, and another one going on about Northside and Price Hill. And
got to take Ray Gindos around.
And it was just, Ray was here, and every little nook and cranny of the space was being used the way that we wanted it to. So little memories like that are what can I take away from 2024?
Yeah, we were hoping for more scandals. There were no scandals. It was all just
At
really
CNU?
Yeah.
Well, Kathy
In the
told us
office
about-
specifically.
We didn't, I think we said we would spill some kind of wine or something on our white couch, and
Yeah,
that didn't happen,
somehow.
so I was a little disappointed in CNU
I did
for that.
figure out how to sleep on that couch, though.
Yeah,
The Waves
just-
couch,
I
I
have
conquered
not.
the Waves couch this year.
Good. Hopefully we can put up a photo of the couch as we talk about it.
But not me sleeping on it.
No, I think for me it was surprisingly less project-based and less kind of client project-based and more about the experiences we've had with our own spaces and how those have been applied to our work with our partners.
Yeah, and just to put a bow around that, I think I love what you said about the team that has come together on this. We had a great time in Lexington for 3 days. A lot of it was retreat, talking about much of this stuff that we brought up today, but a lot of it was just experiencing a place that a lot of people hadn't experienced before together and seeing it and talking about what we're seeing together. And I thought Lexington did a great job. It was a great decision, whoever made that decision to host it there. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a good team that is doing a lot of good work, so
Yeah.
it's good to get them together.
So
2025.
2025,
What
the year that is.
The predictions for the year.
Prediction pod.
Predictions.
Everybody's got one. I hate predictions. I don't, that's not how I operate. And that's, I think in some ways a blessing, in other ways a bug in my wiring. But I think things that interest me, I guess, is another way of thinking about that. I think what we saw in 2024 that will probably continue in 2025 is the changing geography of retail, and in particular food and beverage, I think is fascinating. And you look at locally, the number of restaurants and bars and breweries that have closed or have been rolled up into bigger firms, I think is interesting. I think we're seeing the shift of a lot of retail energy to neighborhoods, to first-ring suburban towns, retail really focusing along trails and parks. Part of that is probably, I don't know, I don't have a lot of the data to back this up yet, but I think a lot of it is a lot of the PPP scaffolding and funding is burnt off. And so, market reality is hitting in. A lot of these were concepts that were just due for a refresh or a rethink. So I think retail, the changing landscape of retail, and then that's even before you get into the, now firm establishment of what e-commerce and AI is doing to how we consume. A lot to go in there, but I think that's also linked to downtowns. We touched on that before. I think to crib a comment you've made recently, I think one thing that makes downtowns so great is they're constantly in need of reinventing themselves. And if you look at downtowns, particularly in the US, but really the world over, you see layers of reinvention, some good, some bad. And we're at that point again where reinvention is necessary.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm actually going to crib your comment.
I was going to say, did I say any of that?
Yeah, no, you didn't say that, but
Okay.
It sets up what you said, which is downtowns had kind of gotten boring and kind of gotten stagnant, and they need to embrace weirdness again. And
And they will.
Right. That's part of the ebb and flow of particularly downtowns. And I think we're just right at the beginning of that. And what's going to separate downtowns that flourish over the next half generation and those that continue to languish is the ability to embrace weirdness, to test ideas, to not be so serious about themselves that they can't know when to get out of their own way, and let human connection, human creativity, human ingenuity kind of be the what draws other people to want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think going back to just taking that example back to the retail food comment, the high value address for retail and food is becoming, like you said, the first ring suburbs, trail fronting projects. Downtowns are hitting a reinvention point. My hope from a food standpoint in particular is that we start to see another new wave, at least in towns like Cincinnati, of really bootstrap, creative, chefs and food entrepreneurs come back Because I think we saw that coming out of the recession, the big recession of '08, and those groups have become either failed or become successful and have second locations or have moved out to those first string suburbs, kind of followed the millennials out there. So it creates hopefully an opening for a new wave of really interesting stuff to be happening on the food scene. But then you could apply that same thing to development or public art, experiences, stuff like that too. So,
well, and we've already seen in a lot of our developer clients this understanding that you can't rely on retail to drive the pro forma, but even more than that, that you almost have to be co-invested with some of these new entrepreneurs, these new hustlers, to make that a reality. The question I think remains is, do we have enough spaces that are accessible to these new food entrepreneurs? And that's where it comes full circle back to Elliot. This is a new entrant into the hospitality world. And he's paying market rate rents, and that are actually surpass the market. But he's
still affordable.
But still affordable. Mm-hmm. And it's because his service area is 80 square feet. Mm-hmm. His hospitality area is 600 square feet that can flex into 2,000 square feet on a nice day. Mm-hmm. It relies on online storytelling, but absolutely human touches when you're there.
Yeah, high-end hospitality.
Yeah, but all done in a way that he can experiment. He can fail fast, fail forward, and learn along the way. So I think downtowns, districts in general, I think the ones that embrace that, I think it's more needed than ever.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Elliot has a location 5 years from now on a trail, in a higher end, address, potentially. But giving these younger folks affordable, really character-rich opportunities to start in the urban core is critical. Yep. And Dayton is a neighborhood, but really is adjacent to downtown. So, in many ways.
So I think you're going to the succeeding places you're going to see really start to understand that, support that, know how to fund that, and drive that. But on the other side of things, on the other side of the spectrum, one of the surprises I've had over the last couple of years is we've traditionally worked in slower growing places that really had to focus on creativity to make growth happen in a way that reflected their values. But over the past 2 to 3 years, we've also been called to some of the highest rent zip codes in the country, who have understood that flight to quality really is their strong suit, and have been using a lot of the same approaches that we take, but to drive a completely different set of outcomes and growth potential, like Carmel, Montgomery, Dublin, these areas that have traditionally done really well using very traditional methodologies are now, I think, looking at us for what's next.
Yeah, and there's a relationship between these two things we're talking about, which is they've got growth happening in those places you just mentioned, and then that's leaving kind of a new story to be told in some of these urban neighborhoods.
Yeah, they're very much
and
linked.
What this next wave of particularly young people is going to need or want in life out of these spaces, which touches on it like you kind of started with AI and digital kind of, just enveloping yourself in digital experiences, and really then needing to have a quality real life experience.
Well, and that gets
weird
back
to say out loud, but
a
big craving for the first 16 feet, walkability, outdoor patios, like whatever that looks like. So,
well, and it speaks to, I think, another kind of quickly growing aspect of our body of work and how it fits into the overall ecosystem we've created here is the power of brand, the power of story to drive a lot of that. Rare is the project now where we're not including a pretty significant brand and storytelling aspect to it.
Yeah, I mean, more and more you got to get hyper specific around who your audience is and what you want to communicate to them, and how then the built environment promises, fulfills that promise to them, whether it's the materiality of plants and flower pots and public art, and to the kind of arrival and experience of dining or shopping or spending time outside. You gotta get pretty specific these days around that.
We're seeing a split from communities that maybe can engage a marketing branding firm and help them talk a big game, but fail or fall flat on delivering that brand promise, or places that are really focused on placemaking but haven't really figured out how to communicate who they are and really understand their value proposition. And I think what we're seeing and what we're really focused on at Yard is how do you, rather than think of those as two kind of unique pursuits or isolated pursuits, is how do you braid that all together so that as we're understanding brand and story, it's starting to directly influence what we're drawing from a master planning or a design standpoint in the physical environment, so that brand promise is directly connected.
Yeah, and we've seen that come through in several projects. Speaking of Plant Trolley, it just arrived. Including, I'm looking at Home Place in Carmel, Indiana right now, and that's where everything kind of coming together. So keep an eye on that one. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
All right, we should wrap up. I think I have a meeting coming up in a few minutes. Any final thoughts before we close out and head officially into the new year?
No, I'm
mid-decade, 2025.
No, I'm mid-decade, right? I mean, how old are we? We're turning 7 this year, so we're starting. We make the joke a lot.
49 in dog years.
We've kind of left startup phase, and we're now into adolescence.
Yeah.
And we've got.
We can dress ourselves.
Mostly, yeah. And really exciting where we're at and the investments and kind of trends that we saw last year, see how they carry over into this year, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. All right.
Enjoy the anthology,
let's get
everybody.
to work. Yeah, enjoy it. Coming to a mailbox.
Let us know what you think.